Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, folks, to another weekly edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup for the week of January 13th, 2025. Our lead story this week, U.S. Forest Service withdraws National Old Growth Amendment. That is our lead story. We bring in our Director of Forest Policy, John Culclasure, in a couple minutes here. Headlines from around the nation that we'll get to here in a bit. Fish and Wildlife Service announces Grizzly Listing and Management proposal. The Shark Act is back, one of our more talked about federal policies in 2024. We're going to dive into it. It's been reintroduced. Fish and Wildlife Management Authority and the crosshairs as North Dakota session convenes. 2024 Louisiana black bear season ends in a success. And air guns are back on the table in New Hampshire. All that and more, but let's welcome in for the first time in 2025, good friend and director of our forest policy, John Culclasure. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Hey, Fred. Good morning, man. Good to connect with you again in 2025. Thanks for having me on today.
Indeed, this is a big year for you as we announced at the end of last year. Your transition to the directorship here for forest policy, and getting your feet under you officially. Now it's definitely all yours. So here we go. Right out the gate, we have some movement at the federal level with the withdrawal of the National Old Growth Amendment. Um, let's get into what that means for the listening audience, why that's important, and how CSF is responding to that.
Sure. Thanks, Fred. Yeah. So, long and short is that the outgoing administration a few years ago initiated a rulemaking to amend all 128 land management plans for the units of the National Forest System to provide consistent direction for the management of old growth forests or mature and old growth forests, kind of colloquially being called NOGA, National Old Growth Amendment. CSF and a lot of others in the forestry conservation space and the hunting conservation space were concerned with the process, really over the prioritization of managing for old growth forests over instead of managing for a diversity of habitats. As we've talked about before, we want that diversity of forests, age classes, different types of um, different forest structure across the landscape to support a diversity of wildlife. Deer, turkey, elk, rough grouse. They need different types of habitat than old growth provide. And the big picture takeaway is that this down approach rulemaking would have prioritized old growth forests over focusing on the need to restore forests, improve forest health, increased forest resilience to wildfire, and just would have been a distraction from the Forest Service trying to meet their early successional habitat goals, which they, never meet in their which are laid out in individual forest plans. So the takeaway here is that we're very excited that the rule has been withdrawn. We hope the Forest Service can refocus its efforts on a lot of the challenges it's facing. And from our perspective, that means improving forest health, maintaining access for sportsmen and women, and reducing wildfire threat.
As it pertains, and we're going to get to that in a second here last because it's the timing is very apropos. Um, as it concerns old growth and folks that aren't as dialed in on the wonky nature of policy surrounding that and forest management, what is the, I guess, air finger quote, opposition in this case to our support? I guess, why would people look at an old growth stand and be like, we can't do anything with that and it's got to stay the way it is? What's the
Well, it
motivation?
just it boils down to the old, the argument conservation be this preservation, which has been going on over 100 years. Do you support active stewardship of resources, or do you hands off, leave it alone approach? And from our perspective, there is no such thing as a leave it alone approach. Humans impact every stand, every acre on the national forest system. Uh, through invasive species, pollution, past human disturbances, etc. And I have species moving into areas that were not before, climate change issues. So, we would prefer to have an adaptive, active management approach to address threat and improve forests for wildlife and also for the benefit of humans. But means being able to get into hands and manage them. And the U.S. Forest Service and their own assessment threat, it they found that wildfire, insects, and disease are the leading threat to old growth forests, not timber management. Timber management's really done on a very small fraction of the national forest system, really too small in my opinion, a lot smaller than it used to be. And really, when you look across in a pie chart, more half of the pie chart of a national forest system would already be off limits to management because of wilderness study areas, etc., other similar designations. So this would have just added to that pie of areas that could not be managed, and it would have taken up a ton of time and resources to amend every single land management plan. Would forest plan revisions already take 10 years to do, and some have just finished up being revised. So it just would have been a giant an enormous effort and a lot of manpower, a lot of
Sure.
resources, and the Forest Service has a lot of really immediate threats they need to address now.
Yeah, I mean, in very real time as we're recording this, for the last 6 days, not necessarily, national forests there on the coast there in the Palisades, but, you know, southwestern, California is on fire, has been again for 6 days as we're recording this. Um, the weather forecast isn't looking favorable with those Santa Ana winds, gonna whip up some more of that, and more to the point of the management of forests, whether nationally held, local forests, that management you're talking about and that you're working towards and others are partners to bring that philosophy and that science-based philosophy to bear, why we need to do this is live live playing out in front of our faces right now. And I'm certainly not commenting on that to depreciate what's happening. It's awful out there. It's terrible. Never seen it, quite frankly, anything like it in my life. But it's really driving home the point. You and I last year talked at nauseum about forest management as it concerns fire. And I think, John, that over the years, especially you and I's generation, I can't remember a time where I wasn't getting Smokey the Bear cram down my throat, which I guess holistically is a good idea. But that whole campaign just celebrated 80 years and it morphed into, only you can prevent forest fires to only you are a hands-off approach. We're not burning anything, fire bad. Same thing with our control burns as we talk about and southeast piney forest for upland habitat for turkeys and quail et al. Right? Like people our age, maybe a little older, have this super adverse reaction to fire as a control management tool to avoid what is happening in California right now and has happened throughout the West.
Sure, yeah, what's happening in California is really sad, uh, and it does bring a refocused attention on the need for active management. Those chaparral and scrub oak forests, there might be a little different, and what they're dealing with probably more fuels management and fuel breaks and hardening of the wildland urban interface and that sort of stuff. A little different than kind of the typical controlled burns we talk about.
Mhm.
But yeah, control burning is good. Good fire as it's been promoted. I hope that education that message is changing. People are taking that home. There have been instances where control burns have gotten away and with really bad consequences. They need to be done in the right way, the right time of year, right day, that sort of stuff. Uh, yeah, what's going on in California is terrible, but I hope it does bring some attention. I've seen a lot of articles and see things in the press about discussing prior legislation that the federal government Congress has pushed and has not been signed into law, and I think some of that's going to come back soon. But Congressman Westerman is going to hopefully reintroduce Fix Our Forest Act, which has a lot of really important federal forest management procedures, and that some people would be strongly support.
Yeah, and as you end the article with, there's renewed opportunities here with the new incoming administration, the 119th being sworn in last week. And then obviously, disaster and all that kind of precedes necessity here. And I think all walks of life, their attitudes and perspectives are going to change given the last week's horrible events. And really just like us and our policy portfolios, it transcends R's and D's. This never should have been politicized or a dogma that one side over the other takes. And I think, like to your point, reading the articles, you're seeing that play out now. This affects everybody. Everyone's homes burns, everyone's properties burns, everyone's forest burns, and they are for everybody. It transcends ideology. So um, hopefully, there's a silver lining in the coming months to come out of this, and like you said, there's opportunity here, for to affect some good change.
Sure. Yeah, and that legislation I just referenced last year, it passed the House with really strong bipartisan support, including I think almost 50 Democrats, and a lot of them were California Democrats. I mean, yeah, you've had a lot of bad fires in recent years, and I think it kinda hit home finally that some of the policies that the anti-forestry groups have pushed over the last few decades are coming home, and, whether Save Our Sequoias Act or other, legislative reforms, people are hopefully starting to see the light and see the need to, reform, put in some common sense litigation reform and increase the Forest Service's authorities to be able to do work effectively and at scale.
Well, certainly exciting times ahead. Maybe good, bad, or otherwise, but you got your hands full, and I'm certainly happy you're leading the charge on it for CSF. So, John, thanks for your time today. Thanks for your comments and your contributions to the article. And I'll give you a second to tee up anything else, and we could put a bow on it.
No, yeah, we're just new Congress, new administration. We'll see what comes out of down the pipeline, but we're excited to kind of continue put puts in our forest policy priorities. A lot of them are discussed today, and yeah, also project level implementation. We're going to be trying to support more wildlife habitat improvement projects on federal land. And in my new role, I'm excited to work with you and others on the state program team to really dig into and more comprehensively track state level legislation that impacts forest and forest policy and prescribed fire. So, yeah, it's going to be an exciting year. And thanks for having me on.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir.
All right, my thanks to John for his time and for that update there. Let us now get to the rest of the headlines. This from Marie Newmiller as it concerns the Fish and Wildlife Service announcing a grizzly listing and management proposal. Success of the Endangered Species Act is dependent on coordination amongst federal and state wildlife managers, landowners, and others that have a vested stake in the recovery of a listed species. One of the most pressing challenges with the ESA was failing to dislist species from federal management and return the management of the species to the states once population recovery goals have been met. Unfortunately, in the case of certain species, such as grizzly bears in this particular case, endless circles of lawsuits and other extraneous reasons unrelated to the overall population health of the species threaten to undermine the relationships between federal and state wildlife management and further erode public trust. No doubt. Some of the highlights here: U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced Wednesday, January 8th of this very new year that grizzly bears would remain listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act in the lower 48, including the recovered Greater Yellowstone and North Continental Divide ecosystem population. In addition to maintaining the threatened status for grizzly bears, the proposal also established one distinct population segment of the entire range of grizzly bears in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and Washington, which will likely make the return of the grizzly bears to state management in the future much more difficult. Furthermore, the proposal also establishes new ESA 4D management practices for grizzly bears, but it is unclear how the 4D rule will allow flexibility to manage grizzly bears when necessary. CSF strongly supports science based wildlife management and adherence to long established recovery plans. And certainty of those for those directly impacted by federal decisions. So much to say, but let me just read what Marie's provided here, and then I can editorialize a bit. Uh, so the announcement comes as a response to a petition filed by Montana and Wyoming requested the downlisting of grizzly bears, along with a settlement agreement with the state of Idaho. The states were requesting delisting in both the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. Fish and Wildlife Service denied both petitions filed by Montana and Wyoming to delist grizzlies and return management authority to the respective state agencies. Prior to the decision, the NCDE and GYE population segments were considered recovered by nearly all accounts. However, the establishment of one large distinct population segment removes regional distinctions from the equation. Huh. Once the rule, once the rule is published with the Federal Register, Fish and Wildlife Service will open a 60-day public comment period on the proposal that would merge all grizzly bear recovery zones. Currently, there are 6 grizzly bear recovery zones throughout the Northwest states, which include the Continental Divide there, the Greater Yellowstone, distinct population segments. Under the new proposal, Fish and Wildlife Service would transition to one single distinct population in the northwestern states. In addition to the DPS adjustment, Fish and Wildlife Service is proposing a 4D rule aimed at providing management flexibility as states and federal government work to promote conservation with a goal of eventually delisting the grizzly bears in the lower 48. CSF recognizes the substantial intergovernmental collaboration that has existed between the states and the federal government to recover grizzly bear populations in the Northwest region. As endangered populations reach recovery thresholds, it is important to have a swift and smooth transition from federal to state management in support of the localized wildlife and habitat management plans. CSF will continue to support on the ground science based management practices, including hunting through the North American model of wildlife conservation. I don't know if you could hear them rolling, but my eyes were rolling throughout the entirety of that article. Not and not because of Murray's reporting, but what she unfortunately had to report on. Look, I said it before on this program and say it again. The ESA was never set up to be a perpetual glass bowl around certain species, especially ones that live in the sugar plum fairy dreams cultivated by a Walt Disney upbringing of most Gen Xers, boomers, and younger. This has been abused to the point of, what we're reporting today. You have a recovered population of a species that can be managed by the North American model, and because you have people that have an affinity for these creatures, not that wildlife managers and sportsmen and women do not. They are aesthetically pleasing, and there is a huge segment that has influenced those in the court system to continuously perpetually keep these animals as a threatened species when they clearly are not. There is no conservation mindedness to this philosophy. It is strictly preservationist and a hands-off approach to the degradation potentially of the species down the road with human conflict, human bear conflict, bear livestock conflict. It is it is maddening, and the bears aren't the only ones. There's other, charismatic predator species that have fallen into this. I mean, even even bald eagles for a point, when they were delisted. I mean, there were people that didn't want them taken off. Not that you could hunt bald eagles, but for whatever reason, people just thought they needed to have that moniker assigned to them and then forever. And that's not the point of this. And policymakers need to get a grasp on this and adhere to the spirit in which the ESA was set up and proceed as prescribed. This is not that. This is not doing that. And the state managers have their hands tied and can't do anything. And they are the people on the ground living in these places, living in these ecosystems, literally neighbors with these bears. Shoot, man, I can tell you from personal experience. I went out there to Montana, oh, golly days, over a decade ago, and probably 5, 15 years ago now. Gosh, it's a long time. Anyway, um, man, I saw so many grizzly bears. It was incredible in Yellowstone, outside of Yellowstone. I mean, it really didn't take much of an effort to find these bears, mama bears and cubs, big boars out there on the landscape hunting, elk. It was incredible. But even going outside of the park, there was plenty of bears. And now fast forward apparently 15 years to catch up here. Um, you have all these interactions with bears and hikers and campers and livestock, and you start getting curating all the headlines that are around this. And look, bottom line, state managers need to get control of this, and this has to resolve itself. You can't have people from thousands of miles away making decisions on stuff that's happening in these people's backyards where there is obviously a recovered population that needs to be managed. And per our American system of conservation, wildlife conservation, we have the means and the tools and the ability to do that responsibly and not to harm populations of this particular species. So look forward to some good reporting on this from Marie, but I'm afraid that this can just continues to get kicked despite the conservation community's best efforts. But hey, you never know. Moving on. Bill to resolve conflicts between sharks and anglers has been reintroduced. Welcome back, the Shark Act. Chris Horton and I chopped it up a bit about this last year, so let's get caught up here. Shortly after the 119th, gavelled in this month, the Supporting the Health of Aquatic Systems Through Research, Knowledge, and Enhanced Dialogue Act, or SHART Act, was reintroduced by Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus members, Representative Rob Whitman of Virginia, Representative Mark Vesey of Texas, along with Reps Darren Soto, Florida, and Daniel Webster of Florida. CSF has been a strong supporter of addressing the shark depredation issue using sound science, and the Shark Act will provide that opportunity. In recent years, particularly in the Atlantic Ocean and Gulf of Mexico, the frequency of sharks intercepting fish being landed by anglers and commercial fishermen has increased substantially. As apex predators, sharks play an important role in our natural marine ecosystems. However, cooked fish being landed by anglers or commercial fishermen creates an unnatural and easy meal for sharks and exposes them to potentially harmful fishing gear. As the rate of shark depredation has increased, fishermen have become increasingly frustrated by the issue and continued lack of response from the fisheries management community. The Bipartisan Shark Act would simply establish a non regulatory task force that would be responsible for making recommendations for improving coordination and communication across the fisheries management community on shark depredation, as well as identifying research priorities and funding opportunities. CSF applauds the quick reintroduction of the Shark Act and will work to ensure the bill becomes law so that we can take the first step in addressing serious and growing problem of shark depredation in recreational fisheries. Yeah, man, it's just putting together some people to think about some things. Simply put, like, let's just get this done. So you start looking at things and then come up with the solutions with some of the brighter minds in the fishery space to come up with this. I know, I think Chris and I talked last year about certain technologies that can be employed and putting out signals to disperse sharks or to drive them away, working with their echolocation and however their biology, their systems work. But it seems like there are solutions. People just need to get together um, and start working some out and employing them. The first step is to get this passed and let's organize these people and get them together. So I have no doubt we'll have some good reporting in the future on that from Chris. Oh, heading to North Dakota. North Dakota Senate Bill 2137 would prohibit the North Dakota Game and Fish Department, GFD, from adopting or implementing any policy that would restrict the use of supplemental feeding on private property for the hunting of big game. During the 2023 legislative session, North Dakota legislators introduced a similar bill that would have barred GFD from creating rules prohibiting the use of bait piles while hunting on private land, which was ultimately defeated. The CSF maintains that Wildlife Management Authority should remain with the agency. Um, and when the North Dakota legislative session started on the 7th last week, we had this bill drop. Jake details what exactly that does and how we continue to monitor it and engage on it. Jake states that fish and wildlife agencies like GFD are the best equipped to address fish and wildlife management issues with their respective borders. The management of North Dakota's wildlife should be made by the GFD, and as the department is compromised of capable professionals that carry out the on the ground science based conservation efforts that benefit all North Dakotans. Management authority remaining solely with the state and fish wildlife agency allows them to quickly and effectively make management decisions on the state's storied public trust fish and wildlife resources. CSF will continue to monitor Senate Bill 2137 and similar issues as they move through the legislative process. Yeah, aptly put, Jake. Um, again, another perennial issue that's got a foothold right now in our country as far as going after boards, commissions, and authority and rulemaking and season setting and all of that. So, um, in short, leave it to the professionals. Don't go to a cardiologist with a heart murmur and tell him I don't think what you're telling me is true because I don't believe in you. I'm gonna go another way. No, 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 no. Gonna take a listen to that heart doctor because he's a professional. Because he's got the schooling and the backing uh, to prescribe the best course of action for me and my bad ticker, right? If I had one, hopefully I do not. In this case here, the analogy I'm making is you have these folks that go through school, they get the degrees, they get the education, they get the science based education. Presuming most of them still have a conservationist understanding of how wildlife management works and not a preservationist understanding, which we're seeing a little bit in the younger class of biologists coming out of higher education. However, those that do get it, we got to listen to them and listen to what they're prescribing and what makes best sense on the landscape where they live for population densities, numbers, management goals, unit goals, all of that. There's a reason we have state agencies. There's a reason why they're funded, why they have a staff, because you and I can't do it. So let them do it. That's the underlying or the overall arching theme here. So thank you for reporting from Jake. More to come there from North Dakota. All right, we're getting down to it here. Somehow I'm going long. Sorry, guys. The bear stuff gets me, and I feel like we got to talk about it and just continue beating that drum. Speaking of bears, Mark Lance brings us this from Louisiana on their first successful black bear hunt that occurred last year. In the spring of 2024, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries Commission voted unanimously to give final approval to reestablish a black bear season in Louisiana. According to Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, 973 applications were received for a black bear tag. The funds generated through the lottery fees and license revenue that the hunt generated will go back into the management of Louisiana black bear by Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, further strengthening the overall health and success of the subspecies. CSF and Louisiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and partner organizations maintained throughout the process that the conservation efforts that Louisiana's put into place over the past 40 years has resulted in a successful rebound of black bears in Louisiana and that a regulated harvest was needed. Hey, grizzly folks, take a look at Louisiana. Look what they did. I digress. Science based wildlife management is one of the key tenets of the North American model of wildlife conservation. And Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and its commission should be commended for following the science in the decision making to bring back a season. The department, as well as its commission, is the entity best equipped to address fish and wildlife management issues in Louisiana. And hunting is the best management tool for maintaining wildlife populations at a level that minimizes human wildlife conflict while also ensuring their continued sustainability. This reestablished season will also incentivize private landowners to conserve and manage critical wildlife habitat to ensure continued success of species that were brought back in part by funding through the American System of Conservation Funding, the user pays public benefit structure of the ASCF, generated over $44 million for conservation in 2023 alone. CSF applauds the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries for a successful black bear season and looks forward to continuing the good work alongside Louisiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, the Department's Wildlife and Fisheries, and our partners to ensure future conservation efforts in the sportsman's paradise. No doubt, great reporting, Mark. And I'll tell you, I mean, fresh off the heels, well, somewhat fresh, of being down there in Louisiana for the NAS Summit in 2024 in November, getting a chance to talk with Governor Landry, Secretary Sheehan, about this very topic. You can go back and listen to that. Mark, myself, and the secretary, we went on a rabbit hole, if you will, on the black bear hunt, the reintroduction, the process, and then it was pretty cool. They had a whole press conference. I think the end of last year, there in December. Governor Landry got up there. Secretary Sheehan was there. I don't wanna say, the fellow that shot the bear maybe? They had a whole press conference highlighting the work, the reintroduction of the bear hunt, but the potential world record, or maybe it was state record. Might have been state record. I might be overblowing it a bit, but nevertheless, some big giant black bear, was harvested. I think it was a handful of folks. It might have been 5, don't quote me on that. I have to go back and listen to the secretary's words in the summit coverage there, the Sportsman's Voice podcast, but, yeah, I wanna say it was like 5 or 8, somewhere in there. But anyway, this guy each tag was designated for a certain person. There was a veterans tag, and this vet, went out, had a successful bear hunt, and got himself a hammer of a bear. I saw the pictures. Just big old head, big noggin on it, big body bear, and, how cool to come out swinging like that. Just really bringing some positive attention and showing the quality, right? The quality, the healthy quality of these bears that are down there and that live there and do so very successfully, and it's just a great celebratory, story to be had here as we come in, some good news coming in to 2025 here. You'd like to think some other states would follow suit. I already called out the Grizzly folks, but like, shoot, this morning as I'm recording this, I saw some ring footage. I don't know where it was in Florida, but like a mama and her 3 cubs, and these aren't like little kitty cat sized cubs. They're like, 2-year-old bears. So it's like 4 sizable bears running up on someone's porch, just kind of having a look around. Florida boasts a pretty good population of black bears. Like to see them do more. I know they've attempted to here in the past, and no doubt, if there's something to be had there, longer season setup. Mark Lance will bring us reporting on that. But way to go. Congratulations, Louisiana. And again, go back and listen to the sound from the governor and the secretary there in day two, part two of the NAS Summit podcast sessions. All right, wrapping this up here. Air gun bill back on the table here in New Hampshire. We covered this again last year. The bill itself for air gunning, using air guns for taking of game species here in New Hampshire, was pulled for further study. There were some folks that just didn't understand the capabilities of them. Had a New Hampshire Legislative Sportsman's Caucus field trip to the 6 Hour Experience Center in Epping last summer, where those more advanced, technologically advanced air gun, air rifle platforms were demonstrated on ballistic jelly. Let some folks from the commission, from the agency, from the legislature get behind them, have a go at them. Really enjoyed it. People saw the efficiency of modern air rifles. Um, and understands that they can be an effective ethical option. The only thing that the legislation was really lacking last year and at its present state right now, but I'm hopeful we can get there, is lacking the conservation funding language by way of either adding a stamp or adding an annual tag. Like here in New Hampshire, I got to buy a muzzleloader tag. A lot of places, I think you do. I don't know, whatever, $16 so I can participate in the 9-day muzzleloader season that precedes our annual rifle, shotgun season here in New Hampshire, right? So same thing here, and the reason is air guns, uh, arrow shooting air guns, all these platforms, they are not subjected to that manufacturer level, um, Pittman Robinson, Wildlife Restoration Act excise tax that again our community almost 100 years ago threw our hands up and said, "Hey, bring it. This is how we can make bad things good again and fund conservation and how we do and how successful we are at that." So it's not a money grab. It's just making sure if you're using the equipment to go out there and take, just like in the angling world through Dingle Johnson, that everyone's contributing and putting into the pot. This shouldn't be a big lift, a big ask. We're not raising anyone's fees. There are currently no fees, so it stands to reason that this, again, shouldn't be a hard lift. So, looking forward to working with our legislative sportsman's caucus here in New Hampshire, amend that already good bill, make it even better. Let's strengthen it. Let's add that language, account for that conservation funding, and then pass a really, really strong bill. So, I look forward to bringing you hopefully some good positive reporting on that in the future. And yeah, just be really cool to go out there with something different and a new challenge on landscape with some air rifles. So yeah, long show again. My apologies, but a lot of good information and lots of things happening. So, as always, thank you for being with us. Thank you for bringing us along for part of your day. Do go back and check out last week's feature with our Vice President of Policy, Brent Miller, as he and I talk about our priorities here at CSF for the 2025 legislative sessions throughout the country and the states on the Hill, and then some of the more proactive policies we are bringing to our legislative sportsmen's caucuses and having them work these issues instead of being on our heels, taking a proactive approach where we are now and the capabilities that we do have as an organization and with our NAS network to advance pro sportsmen and women, pro conservation policy and get stuff done for our community. Anyway, check it all out. Again, thanks for always having us along, sharing, liking, subscribing, 5 stars, all of it. And we appreciate you. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We will see you all next Wednesday. No feature. We're back on regular scheduled programming here for the new year. So be safe out there. Again, see you next Wednesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. See ya. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.